During this same 37-year period, the supply of actual money in circulation was inflated from $5.7 billion to almost $51 billion. This constant inflation of the amount of money in circulation increased the amount of available credit to gigantic proportions, which enabled the politicians to float enough government securities to finance the national debt from $19.5 billion in 1932 to an incredible $353.7 billion on June 30th, 1969. $353.7 billion is almost too large to comprehend. So let's look at it another way. Every man, woman, and child in the United States owes $1,800 in addition to their current taxes. In the case of Mr. Jones, with a wife and 3 children, that means his share of the national debt is $9,000. The United States government securities held by the Federal Reserve banks, which totaled $57.8 billion on December 3, 1969, earn interest and provide the bulk of Reserve Bank earnings. From its beginning in 1914 to the end of 1968, the Federal Reserve banks showed a profit after operating expenses of $18,228,468,126. A look at just where this vast amount of profit ended up is very revealing. The Federal Reserve Act required that privately owned banks invest their money in stock in the reserve banks, and provided that the member banks were to receive a dividend of 6% annually on their investment. Member bank dividends on their investment has accounted for just 4 cents of each dollar in profit accumulated by the Federal Reserve banks through 1968. Another 4 cents from each dollar in profit has been paid into a surplus fund. The remaining 92 cents of every dollar profit of the Federal Reserve banks, a total of $16,742,166,875, has gone to the United States Treasury. The Federal Reserve banks were created through government action. They are controlled by political appointees of the government, and the overwhelming portion of their profits go back to the government. To contend that they are privately owned and controlled is to deny reality. The Federal Reserve banking system is a quasi-governmental agency created by politicians who sought a means to escape the chains of the Constitution, which had given the government the power to only coin money. The constantly rising prices of the goods available is the result of their success in creating a means to deliberately inflate the money supply. The purchasing power of the dollar has shrunk by an incredible amount. The dollar of today is worth only 38 cents compared to the dollar of 1939. Mr. Jones must earn over $10,000 annually today to provide for his family, as well as his counterpart of 1939, who earned $3,800. Today, everyone notices that prices are climbing upward at an alarming rate. Unfortunately, due to their lack of knowledge in economics, they do not realize that the politically manipulated inflation of the money supply is the principal cause of the rising prices. Demands that the government step in and enforce strict control of prices grows louder almost daily. Many confused people echo the cry and thus find themselves supporting an incredible paradox. The politicians are being turned to and asked to save the people from the runaway prices, which are a direct result of the politicians' deliberate inflation of the money supply. A suspicious-minded person might wonder if the politicians planned this result from the beginning. Questions about the motives of those who created the Federal Reserve System are difficult to answer, but there is considerable evidence to indicate that some of the advocates saw it as a means to put the monetary system in the United States under political control. This book, Philip Drew, Administrator, The Story of Tomorrow, first appeared in 1912, the year before the Federal Reserve Act was passed. The author, who was anonymous at the time, told how his hero, Philip Drew, by cleverly exploiting turmoil in America, had seized control of the government. Philip Drew was portrayed as pure of heart, all-knowing, and so completely unselfish that as a dictator he was actually a blessing for the people. He cleansed America of all its so-called ills and inequities, rode off into the sunset, and the people lived happily ever after. The book obviously reflected the political philosophy and ambitions of its author. Years later, it was revealed that the author of Philip Drew, Administrator, was Colonel E. Mandel House. Colonel House was a powerful political manipulator who never sought nor held any public office during his long career. However, House was the closest confidant and the most trusted and listened to advisor of Woodrow Wilson before and during Wilson's presidency. His influence over President Wilson has been described as almost hypnotic. These now rare volumes, the intimate papers of Colonel House, were published in 1926 and shed light for the first time on the vital role that House had played in the creation of the Federal Reserve System. These papers revealed that even before Wilson's inauguration as president in March 1913, House was holding meetings with those in the Congress who were later to introduce the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Later, although Wilson was the president, Colonel House assured Carter Glass, the chief congressional sponsor of the bill, that he, House, would have the president bring pressure to bear if that was necessary to get the bill passed. House has been described as the unseen guardian angel of the bill, a title he certainly earned. The Federal Reserve Act gave President Wilson the power to appoint the members of the Board of Governors who would control the reserve banks. But it was Colonel House who interviewed those who were being considered for these vitally important positions, and those eventually chosen by Wilson were the ones recommended by House. Colonel E. Mandel House, a political manipulator who believed that a benevolent dictatorship was actually desirable, appears to have been the key person in the creation and launching of the Federal Reserve banking system, the instrument that has enabled the politicians to generate the endless supply of fiat money that has driven the American dollar to the brink of destruction. It would be convenient to place all the blame for the disastrous inflation of the money on the houses and misguided or unprincipled politicians. But a major share of the responsibility for the flood of fiat money falls on that growing number of Americans who greedily clamor for all manner of special subsidies from government and elect to office those who promise to continue and even increase the handouts. Freedom in America has been crumbling for decades, and it will continue to crumble until the American people are ready to accept and fulfill the responsibilities that go hand in hand with freedom. The United States government has a legitimate role to play in monetary matters. The path to restore that constitutionally defined role will be difficult and perilous. But if this truly gigantic task can be achieved, the people will once again control the fruits of their labor. Time is running out. If sound money is to be restored, responsible Americans must demand that the journey begin now.